right. Welcome to another episode of the Here We Grow podcast. So if you haven't seen this podcast before, we're interviewing entrepreneurs and local realtors, and today a not so local realtor. But basically the gist of kind of what we're trying to do here is talk about, first of all, kind of anybody with the growth mindset. That's where the Here We Grow comes from. And, you know, somebody who doesn't settle, I believe if you're not growing, you're dying. So the people who don't settle for average and continue to push themselves. But the other big thing that we're talking about is through everybody's entrepreneurship journey, I've found there's always something super crazy that you have to do or you have to put yourself through. And everybody has their own unlimited stories, especially realtors get put in crazy situations. So we're going to talk to today. I got Morgan Murphy on from PEI, Red Isle Realty. So why don't you start off with giving us kind of your story in real estate, what got you into real estate in your first couple of years. So Morgan runs his own independent brokerage out there now, but tell us what led up to, you know, doing that.
Yeah, for sure. So I started, I guess, at a young age back home here. I started at 24 years old, worked for a local company out of Hunter River, Prince Edward Island. I grew up in New Glasgow, kind of like a central area of PEI. Joined the forces with Alan Weeks Real Estate in Hunter River. I worked under him for 2 to 3 years. That was a great family, friends of mine. I grew up with best friends as Taylor and Landon, and then kind of went to work for them for a couple of years. They're a family-owned brokerage. They were great to take me in, kind of looked after me as if I was one of their own, which is kind of nice to kind of grow with. You know what I mean? It was great to kind of have that relationship with them. After a couple of years, decided to kind of, you know, now's the time on this age. I got all kinds of time in my hands, no kids. Time I was single. I'm not now, but at the time, you know, I was thinking you may as well jump into it now and try to learn as much as you can while you have the time to do it. So that's kind of what kind of set me up to want to go on my own, to try my own thing. And since then, I guess we've never really turned back. We started in January of 2021. There was me, and I didn't put two of my friends, Mike Craig and Jeff Ellsworth, played ball with them for years, actually. We ended up starting the brokerage as just 3 people, where we kind of started, you know, in a basement nook that we could find a spot to put a printer and a computer. Never had an office, just kind of built a brand, worked amongst each other for kind of helping each other out across PEI. Mike's from Stratford, I'm Central, and Jeff's from the western part. And that's kind of what we've tried to grow with, you know, so far, is trying to be completely island wide from tip to tip. So I got 2 questions before you keep going here. Okay. So the one thing is that we have in common that I didn't know is that you got into the business really young. So I started at 21, and it's really challenging. Like, you know, most of your friends at 21, 24 aren't really buying houses, and you have to, you know, build your business from, you know, the referral base is not even there. A lot of realtors, this is their second career. So they've started in, you know, usually sales or something else, some other asset or aspect of their 100%. Life. And then they come to this as a second career. So, how did you find that in your first couple of years? And, with obviously you had some help. Was that tough to build your business, and especially under the wing of, you know, another brokerage? Yeah, for sure. And, you know, PEI, I think, differentiates a little bit from on the Ontario market where, you know, we're not as much like billboards and marketing and on that side of things. I mean, some people here do a great job, and I try to kind of prime myself off of marketing. But, you know, here is built on trust and relationships and word of mouth. Like, we're kind of a smaller town, smaller province. So the big thing here is to kind of build a reputation that people trust. And I find a lot of the times people pick their agent here based on trust and reputability from who they've learned from other people have done a good job. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So from here, I was fortunate enough that I was very community involved at a young age. I did a lot of coaching. I played a lot of sports, hockey, baseball, golf. I was always kind of around the clubhouses, the rink. I was a rink rat for sure growing up. And, you know, that kind of helped me build trust and relationships, even with like older crowds. Worked in a local community restaurant where, you know, you get to flirt with all the 60-year-old ladies coming in from the senior home and kind of build that relationship a little bit around the community and stuff. And I think that's kind of what set me apart from setting myself apart from everybody else and kind of growing so quickly, is because I've kind of had a little bit of a reputation where you were working and networking your whole life without even knowing you were doing it. Do you know what I mean? If you're a social person 100%. And you're involved like that, you know, you're working your whole life networking without even understanding that you're doing it, right? And some people don't see that, but
100%. I think that, it's funny you say like, the big thing was trust there too, is like, I tell this to every listing, every listing appointment I go on and every buyer appointment I go on, it's the same thing. Like, I think that everything comes down to is like the most important thing you can have in a realtor is trust. Cause if without that, this process, it's stressful enough as it is. You need to know that the person, 100%. Is in your corner. And I think realtors get a bad rap because there's enough of them out there that, really are in it for themselves and they're not there to actually really serve the client, to the best, for what's best for the client. So I couldn't agree. And so what's like, the market that you guys work in? Cause so we're actually not that big here. Cause I'm out of Kingston. Like our population is, Brian, you might correct me on this. I think we're like 200,000, something like that. You don't know either. 137,000. So we're not all that big either. And it's a small town. Everybody knows everybody. The other thing with us is like, cause Toronto's a very close market. The other thing with us is like the relationships also with other realtors is huge because you don't want to burn those bridges. You're going to do deals with these guys the rest of your life. Right. So what's the size of the market that you guys deal in? Do you think that goes into, that fact as well with the trust thing?
Yeah. Well, we'd be similar because your town almost has the same amount as our province.
Okay,
so,
cool.
It's kind of a little bit different in that sense. But we definitely big time, like you said, working with realtors and kind of building that relationship has made my life a lot easier too. Like every industry, everyone, has a bad apple that sometimes you're a little bit upset to answer the phone call for, but not being that person, I think is crucial here. Cause it could be, you could do 10 deals, 12 deals here with the same realtor. Do you know what I mean? Especially if they're similar to local region as you. So having that respect for one another and kind of holding that ethic and professional standard, I think is huge. And I think like we chatted about with that trust before, that kind of comes into a huge factor of with your clientele's trusting you, referring you. And if the other agent works with you before and they trust that your values and your ethics are in the right place, they're going to probably be more apt to want to work with you as well. Do you know what I mean? They'll be pushing your listings a lot more too, which I think is huge. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah. So the one actually the biggest thing that I wanted you to talk about today, besides the crazy stories that you have, which we'll get into in a second, but is the reason that we got connected is we ended up sending a referral out your way. And I was doing the client that we had wanted me to do a little bit of digging and find them whoever I thought was the best in that area. And we didn't really have much of a relationship before. And so I started going through kind of like, who's the top agents out there based on reviews and everything. But for me in my generation, and I'm sure you're the same way, is like the first thing I do for any business I'm looking at is I go to social media, right? So you guys had huge social media presence. And the other thing that I really liked was you're obviously an entrepreneur because you started your own brokerage. We had an independent brokerage before my father had, right? Before we switched to EXP, but that kind of intrigued me as well, where it's like, you can tell from, I'm looking at your listing photos online. I was like, this guy's obviously a younger guy and he started his brokerage. So what was the tipping point? Cause obviously, what made you want to go out on your own and start? Because that's got to be very scary. Just three guys in a basement with a printer, starting your own brokerage, right?
Yeah, we lost a lot of sleep there for the first little while getting started. And you know what? Some of the hardest thing for me, Matt, was actually leaving where I was at because it was very family oriented, right? Like I knew them my whole life. I was best friends with the guys. The father was great to me. The brokerage was great to me. So sometimes, you leave on bad terms. Sometimes it's easier, right? But in this case, the big thing I lost sleep for right off the get-go was having to go in there and say, hey, guys, I've decided on my own. I'm going to take the next step. I'm really going to try to do this for myself. It had nothing to do with you, but, that's kind of what I've decided. And that kind of played a big factor. Once I felt like I got over that hump and I got my brand started and I got my company going, we made a couple of our first sales early, which was nice to get a little bit of relief off your back. Yeah. It kind of just gave you a hunger, right? Which is something you can't teach, I guess. And that's kind of what I kind of focus on with my agents is, I can teach you the agreements. I can teach you the logistics, but I can't teach you to want to get up at 6 a.m. and grind all day to try and get listings in business, right? And that's kind of something that I kind of love a little bit. And that kind of gave me a little bit of, there's no ceiling now, it's your own brand. You take it to where you want to get it. And until you're satisfied, then nobody else is. Do you know what I mean? So that was the big thing for me that drove me to kind of wanting to do my own thing. I appreciate your compliments there on the marketing, and that's kind of something I took it to our agents, and I kind of try to promote as much as we can. We have ways in office that we can kind of help our agents with providing good marketing. And I think that kind of goes to speak for itself. You know, the extra cost of marketing is going to get you that extra business, and it goes a long way. I love watching your guys' videos, man. As soon as I see it on my feed, it's the first thing I stop and see, right? So it's kind of one of those things that it puts your name out there too. It sets you apart. And as soon as you see someone doing something that anybody else isn't, that kind of makes you want to use them and kind of refreshes your mind as soon as they start thinking about it too, right? So it's all about branding in a sense. And at the same time, you're trying to provide the best marketing possible to get that house as much value too. So it goes good for the sellers and probably just as good, if not better, for us, in my opinion. But.
Absolutely. Like the way I looked at it took me a while to take the social media thing seriously. And until I got connected with some of the people at EXP here who have like basically built their entire business off of it, I didn't realize how powerful it was, but the concept that I kind of like, as I started taking it more seriously, I started thinking like you mentioned before, the old days, it was like the big thing used to be billboards everywhere, like kind of just general branding. Well, the most expensive billboards you could pay for are the ones that are on the main streets where everybody travels, the most people travel, right? Well, exactly. You have to pay the most amount of money for that to get the most amount of action, but social media is where everybody travels every single day. And it costs you absolutely nothing, right? So that's what kind of like... you can
see it 4 times instead of driving by for 10 seconds. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're a sponsored ad, every time you go on, it's there, right? So that's kind of exactly what we tried to do with our marketing as well, is try to promote the phone screens as much as you can, right? And here's a little bit different. You know, we try to get into like a lot of sponsorships locally and helping people locally to get your name out there just because we're a small town, right? So you see our name on people's jerseys and sweaters. People appreciate that kind of stuff back home here, right? So I got one more. Absolutely. So I have one more question though about, you said, you know, when you started that brokerage, the biggest thing that you liked about it was that there was no ceiling, and, you know, a lot of the things that you said there resonate with me. And, you know, I think that the idea that we get into, like, everybody gets into real estate for the same reason. We want to make money, right? Yeah, and the fact that what we do has no ceiling is kind of, you know, whether you're at your own brokerage or wherever you're at, or you have your own brokerage, you know, I think that sales is like the sky is the limit, right? So 100%. I think that's why everybody gets in the business. But the other part you talked about, which is kind of, it's been a frustrating factor for me in the past, is like, you know, not everybody has the same drive, and it's sometimes hard to understand why other people aren't seeing things the way that we are. So what pushes you, like, cause I know what pushes me to kind of get out, like you said, get up at 5, 6 in the morning and go hard. Sure. What is it that pushes you to do that? Because obviously that must have started before you started your own brokerage, and, you know, it's got to have continued now. It's even scarier now when you're on your own. So what pushes you to continue to try to do better? Yeah, well, you know, it's obviously, you know, money's a big factor. We chatted about that. That's why everybody wants to get into real estate. You know what I mean? But, you know, whenever you start building for your own, you're trying to build a reputation, that's addicting, man. Like once you kind of get something built and you start kind of getting some sales going through, it gets addicting where you're already thinking of your next one. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think the big thing that kind of drives me is I came from a company where you've seen a generational pass on, right? Where that person passed it to his kids and he built a legacy for his family. And, you know, you tip your cap to that kind of stuff. We don't have any kids yet. I got the girlfriend and hoping to have kids someday. You know, it'd be awful cool to be able to generationally pass down, be able to see, you know, your kid sitting in your office chair of something that you built up. I think that's one of the big passions for me, is to be able to still have something that I can pass on that's valuable to them. And, you know, everybody has their other side gigs. You know, you invest, you do your own thing. And in order to get to the opportunity to reach those goals of, you know, if you have a goal set, you want to own your own 6 unit, or you want to buy your own piece of land to develop, or you want to be into the investing side of things that you see people investing in every day that you're helping get there. If you want to get there, the way to get there is to kind of work hard and get yourself there in this industry. You're not getting a paycheck for doing nothing here, right? So you may as well get up and try to take advantage all the time you can, I guess. But
absolutely. And well, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is like, you know, we create, no matter how hard we work, you know, you could sell 100 homes this year. You got to wake up January 1st next year and you got to sell 100 more, right? So
you start at zero again. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So you gotta, you know, but it gives you the opportunity, like you said, to create more passive income and stuff like that. I think that should be everyone's goal. But, you know, that's the other frustrating thing is I see some, you know, a lot of agents, they get a little bit of success and all of a sudden the Range Rover's in the driveway. And it's like, you know, that could have been a rental property, right? Like, and And especially when we're selling,
old, I'm not going to say I didn't do that, but I'm starting to grow up and learn that the hard way. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so, cause I mean, the thing is like, I've had these discussions with my dad, who's been in the business 20 years. A lot of times it's like, you know what, I'm like, why are people not putting in these hours? Why aren't people driving and stuff? And he's like, if everybody could push if everybody pushed themselves as hard as you're pushing yourself, like the competition would be a lot tougher. Like not everybody wants to push themselves that hard. Right. And I think
for sure.
It's kind of tough to wrap your head around. My thing was like, my first 3 years in the business, I did okay, but that was it. Like, it was like, I just did okay. Yeah. And my dad's kind of like, he's got that gift, that natural born salesperson. He sold 30 homes his first year and he was doing it part-time. So he just kind of he's just good at it. And it didn't come as naturally to me. I had to work a lot harder, but like over my first 3 years, I was like, man, I know that I could push myself harder, and getting in that slump of like, not knowing that I could have done better was what started to push me to be like, I need to be working harder, because this business is such a huge opportunity for anybody that's in it. Like all you got to, and the crazy thing is like, people out there have already done it. Good artists copy, great artists steal. All you got to do is repeat what somebody else is doing and basically copy it and do the same thing, right? It's like, I'm not the first person in real estate to try this real estate podcasting thing. It's just, I'm trying to do everything everyone else is doing and work hard. That's what it comes down to, right? So,
100%, man.
So in those first,
having those mentors and seeing them do it, right? Like, I got people here that are top agents and PEI that I probably call every 3 days, and some of the times just ask how their dog's doing. Do you know what I mean? And having those people there to be able to mimic and ask questions and see how they did is enough to drive you right there. It's the guilt of when you're not doing something, that guilt of not getting yourself ahead. That doesn't leave, no matter if you sell one house that year or 100 houses that year. That's when you're successful. Do you know what I mean? It's whenever you always have that guilt. But
yeah, it's like, I don't know if you read the book Relentless about Michael Jordan. It talks about how every time he won a championship, the first thing that came out of his mouth was like, all right, now I got to go win. How am I going to win the next one? Right. It's the same thing. As soon as if you have that true drive, it's like, as soon as you sell a property, it's like, all right, where's the next deal coming from? What are we doing next? How are we going to do better? So
that's when you love it. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So those are like the positives in real estate, but let's talk about, cause I told you last night, I called you and I was like, you got to think of some crazy stuff that you might've seen, over your years in the business. And, so did you come up with anything? Was there anything that you thought of that you're like, man, cause like the way to phrase it is like, you didn't expect to be dealing with that kind of stuff when you get into real estate.
Well, there's a couple. One, I can blame a tenant. And one, I can only look in the mirror and blame myself. And it was funny last night when you called me and told me this. I was driving along with one of my best buddies, and we were on speakerphone in the truck. And you're like, yeah, man, like we're going to need a couple stories here that you're going to have to tell them that are pretty funny. And he just looked at me like almost busting the gut laughing, because he's like, what one are you going to tell here? Like, this is going to be good. So anyway, there's a couple. I mean, there's the standard real estate ones where, you're showing a 6-unit walk through. Think everybody's vacant, get to that last 6-unit, and buddy's sitting there in his complete underwear with marijuana like lit in the ashtray, right? So we're just there like, yeah, you know what, maybe this spot isn't the spot for you guys, kind of thing. You see that all the time. The worst one for me was whenever, this is when I'm going to make it clear that this is when I was young in the industry and doing it part-time. We went to a wedding dance on Saturday night, and I had showing signed up for 10, 10:30 and 11.
I can already see where this is going.
So it's one of my good friends back home. And anyway, she's having a wedding and she needs a bartender in the afternoon. So I said, yeah, I'll give you a hand. No problem. We'll go down. It's a beautiful day, everything's going good. She starts feeding me beers. It's like 2:00 in the afternoon, right? So we're having a good time bartending, things ends. We go back to the wedding dance, and it's like a back home country wedding, like a tent in the backyard, live music, everybody's having a ball kind of thing, right? So anyway, we continue drinking since 2:00 in the afternoon, I'll make that clear. And the wedding dance comes on, but 8:00 hits, everybody's having a good time. I decided it'd be a good idea to stand on the chair on the dance floor to kind of start dancing. As I get up, the leg gives out, man. I go straight forward, flat on my nose across the table. Everybody's laughing and carrying on. I'm up kind of embarrassed, blah, blah, blah. So I get up the next day, SOS. How the heck am I getting to these showings? It's 8:00. I got 2.5 hours to get myself together and get to these showings. So who do I call? Mom.
Yeah.
Mom, I need you to come grab me, take me to my car. So anyway, she's good enough to come get me and take me back to town. Doesn't say a boo. Everything's great. We stop, get coffee. Anyway, I get home, get tidied up, get in my car, get to the showing, and I'm like, man, I made it. Like, this is great. We're here, right? So we're sitting in the driveway. I'm like 15 minutes early because I'm paranoid. See the buyers come in. I'm like, all right, perfect. Let's take a look at myself here and see how we're getting along. Look in the mirror, and man, I got 2 black eyes. Like they're down to the middle of my cheeks from hitting this table. And my mom just decided not to tell me on the way back in the show. Right?
That was like my first question. I was like, what did mom say when she's in the car?
Oh, didn't just probably knew this guy doesn't need to hear it right now. So she just let me get back to town, right? Anyway, so I get there and I'm like, oh my God, they're in the driveway. What am I going to tell these people happened, right?
Oh, no.
So before I went to show it to them, I brought this big dog. I got a dog. He's about 100 pounds, chocolate lab, and he sat in the truck. So we're in there and he comes out and he's like, man, what happened to your nose? I'm like, oh, me and the dog were wrestling. He got me with the headbutt,
nice.
Going on, telling them whatever I can. But the best part of the story is everybody's calling me from the wedding the night before, like, how's your showings today? Anyway, I sold them a house, so it was pretty good to call them back and say, broken nose and all, we got the house sold, which is kind of great.
That's amazing. I had one set. I was literally writing down so many things that you were similar stuff that I've had happen to. The one I've already told on this podcast, but there was this huge in Kingston, there's a band called Glorious Sons. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they're a big Canadian band. They got enormous, and they're from Kingston. They had this huge concert on this Saturday night, and I was showing houses all day in the middle of nowhere during the Saturday. And I was driving to my parents' place, who was having a huge party that night. Literally over 100 people. And then we were taking a school bus from my parents' house to the concert. So anyways, I'm showing the last property of the day. It's cottage property. It's about an hour north of where my parents' house is. And I go to put my car in park at the top of a hill on a waterfront property, and my car just keeps rolling. So my car breaks. Anyways, my car breaks down. I managed to lock it down, but I have to bring everything that I need for the concert. I can't go to the concert in my suit, right? So I have to get my clients not only to drive me to my parents' house where there's 100 cars and people partying in the front yard and drop me off there. I have to unload everything that's in my trunk, which was a case of beer, one of those big growlers of beer, all my spare clothes and stuff. And I'm like, oh guys,
to the office. Yeah.
I'm like, oh guys, you guys want a growler? I just keep these in my truck for clients, weirdly warm. And so I ended up giving them one and was trying to pass it off that's what I had it there for. And then the drugs one is too easy. Every time you go somewhere, I've got a few of them. The one recently happened. I had a seller go, they give me the keys and they're like, hey, listen, it was a commercial building. They're like, hey, can you go to this, just go check it out on your own, whatever. Let me know how it goes. Here's the keys. And they're like, just look out for Joe or whatever. He's in the basement. He's on crystal meth. So just kind of I would stay away from him. Maybe if you hear him kind of down in the basement, he's a super nice guy, but he's probably on crystal meth. So just kind of steer clear maybe if you can, but he is a super nice guy. I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this?
How do you pass that on to a buyer? Honestly, you know what I mean?
I know. So luckily I was just previewing it by myself. But I had somebody with me. Otherwise, I probably just wouldn't have gone. But luckily, buddy wasn't there when 100%. I go. What else you got? You got anything else for me, or any other good stories?
I don't know. Off the top of my head, I can't think of too many. I mean, there's probably a couple I can't bring up on here, but maybe we'll talk about those.
That's up to you. I was going to say that's up to you because I brought it all up. I have another one. Exactly. I don't know if I've told this one on here, but I had one where, because of the weed thing, I was thinking I had this client ask me to show a property that had no interior pictures and media red flag. Right. And the properties are just super, super cheap. And I'm like, something's up. I did everything in my power to be you understand, you're buying this for your family and it's in a rough neighborhood and there's no interior pictures. I don't know what we're walking into. Guys hell bent, he had to see it. So I go with, luckily he didn't bring his family. I go just with the guy. my client. We walk in the front door and I'm like, da, 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 like nobody opens the door and opens the door. Okay, hello. And this guy comes out and nearly bumps into me, and he's got a huge like bong in his hand, and he's like going out to the front deck to smoke. And I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, oh, go on in. It's all good. So then I go in, there's a couple on the couch. The lady is changing her naked kid on the couch, and the guy is holding back 2 pit bulls with his like by their collars, and they're like pulling and barking at me, and like I mean they're big pit bulls, and they're on like those metal. Yeah, they're like on metal chains, and he's holding them, and he's like, yeah, just go ahead. Like, I'll hold on to these guys, whatever. So I'm like, oh my God. So I go in, first room, there's a guy smoking weed in that room. Second room, there's 2 guys passed out. It's like the middle of the day. These guys are passed out. The one guy has
a frat house in the middle of it.
Yeah. Oh no, it was worse. But there's a guy passed out, no shirt on. Then I go around the corner, and I didn't know anything about, so there's a separate unit in the basement unit. And I go down to go down the stairs, and I didn't know like there was somebody else living down there, but there's a curtain at the bottom of the stairs. And I'm like, hello, anybody down here? No answer. And so all of a sudden I'm like reaching for the curtain, and like, oof, the curtain comes open, and there's a big guy with like a super old guy with a big white beard. And he's like this close to my face. And he's like, there wasn't supposed to be any showings today. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like we gave, hopefully the landlord gave you proper notice. We talked to the landlord, whatever. Are we able to come through? And he's like, yeah, just 1 second. I'm like, okay. So I hear like all these like locks and stuff going on. I'm like, all right. So then he finally lets us into the basement. He has his stove on. So it's like February. He has his stove on, and the stove's like the oven's open. And he's like, I said, what's going on here? And he's like, oh, that's how I heat the place. Like, oh my God. So as we're walking through, there's a guy with like, I couldn't really tell what he was doing, but it was obviously drugs. He was like, he had like something in front of him. So he was like this, there was like something in front of him, and he's like doing all this crazy stuff, and he's just in the back corner. And then as the guy walks me through, there's like doors like probably this big, and there was like 6 of them, and it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, and there was locks on every single one. And I'm like, oh, that's inviting.
So the craziest, this one vacant.
Yeah. So the craziest part was, I was like, we got to get out of here. I kept looking at my client like, you seen enough yet, dude? Like, I think we're good. And so finally he kind of gives me the head nod, like, yeah, this isn't for my family. So we go up the stairs. The craziest part and the scariest part, this is probably actually one of the scariest moments I ever had in real estate. Like, actually, it 100% is. I come up the stairs, and we go to turn the corner, and my client's behind me, and I see both pit bulls sitting on the couch, and the guy that was holding them is nowhere to be found. And they look at me, start growling, and just like bolt as fast as they could, like at me. Jesus. And I didn't know what to do. I was like, I put my fists up, like I didn't know if I was like, I'm gonna just bop them on the nose and try to run out of here, I guess. I don't. And then also like if like if they hit what if they attack my client? Now I'm gonna be in a lawsuit, like. And seriously, so I'm freaking out, right? So these pit bulls come charging at me, and they just start wagging their tail and like hanging out with me. And I'm like, my heart came through my chest, man. I was so scared. I was like, this is the day that I die in real estate.
You're there going to get him a mouth phone here in about 3 minutes.
And anyways, so that's basically like the lesson learned was like, I think I need to make sure that clients understand what they're getting into. But 100%. So that's about it for time for us today. But if anybody's looking, yeah, no problem. But I just want to make sure, because our camera runs like a little hot here near the end, and we lost it on the last podcast, just cut out on us. So if anybody's looking for you, your social media and stuff, or your website, do you want to throw that out there real quick? If somebody's looking to make a move in PEI?
For sure. So our company is www.redislerealtyinc.com. Social media is Morgan Murphy, Red Isle Realty. And you can find me on Facebook, Instagram. We have a YouTube channel for the company. You can kind of check out all of our properties and stuff on there. But yeah, that's pretty well the gist of it. We're based out of Charlottetown. Love to look and help anybody we can. And we know you'll do the same for us. So
absolutely. Thanks for coming on, buddy. And as we wrap up every single episode, here we grow. Thanks, brother. What was that?